Hey guys, Ben, Joe, great to be with you here. I'm Laura, for those who are listening in, and here we are in our little Two Circles Roblox world, sitting at this adorable little table. And we're here to have a lot of fun, first and foremost, but also to have some great chat around future fans and the next generation of sports fans. And the reason why that's a really important topic for us to talk about is because it's top of mind with a lot of the folks that we work with within the sports industry. So the three of us have convened virtually to talk about future fans, to explore this world, and to dive into a lot of the deeper topics around where fandom comes from, how it originates, and how the next generation of fans is really going to grow into their fandom. So with that, I would love to kick it over to you guys and maybe tell us a little bit about yourselves.
I can start, yeah. So I think given what we're talking about today and future fans and becoming sports fans at a young age, we thought it would probably be appropriate to ask all of us the same question as to what age did we become fans of sports and why. We've got, Ben and I, if you can see from our avatars here, we've both got football shirts on, which probably does give a bit of a preview as to the sort of stuff we're going to talk about. But I just kind of wanted to chat briefly about how I grew up in a faraway land called New Zealand, and I didn't have access to Premier League football in the same way that people like Ben did. As a result, my fandom of football in particular came about by hearing stories of FA Cups from the 80s as delivered by my dad, and that was how I became a fan. Ben?
Nice. You said you didn't have Premier League football like I did. I very much did not have Premier League football at the start of my Reading supporting days. So I'm a Reading fan. Football is my main sport, and I got into that through, like, it's my dad's team. He passed that on, and going and watching from a very young age. And, you know, ever since, it's hard to get me away. I've had a season ticket for 20 years. So definitely me becoming a fan at a very young age has made that a thing for life that I can't shake. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today, right? And yourself, Laura?
Yeah, also similarly became a sports fan at a very young age, partly through participation. I started playing tennis when I was really young, and that really kind of solidified my love for the sport for the rest of my life. But just panning straight up and looking at that giant Yankees cap that's floating in the air, I became a sports fan and a Yankees fan, being from that area because my family was.
Nice.
So lots of nights spent around the TV, watching games, going to games, secured me as a lifelong Yankee fan.
Nice.
So now that we know kind of who we are and kind of why we're sitting at this table, what are we going to talk about, and why are we going to talk about these future fans?
So yeah, we're going to talk about what we like to call future fans. That essentially is younger audiences and fans that will be passionate fans of sport in the years to come, decades to come. It's really important because we're talking about an audience that is genuinely massive. They represent about a quarter of the world's population at the moment. They'll be approaching 2 billion in the coming years as well. They're also really influential. They impact spending habits around the home, all those sorts of things. They are also influential from a top level as well. They're going to have to deal with quite a lot of things in life that generations before them maybe haven't had to. And they're also, really interestingly, a completely new and exciting audience, I think, in the way that they are fully digital. The way that they consume content, entertainment, media is unlike any generation before them. Gen Alpha, for example, was born fully with the existence of the iPad, I think, or YouTube.
Yeah, so we're talking 2010 to 2015 here, to 2025 here now, right? So we're actually on to Gen Beta now, right? So there are some, when we say Gen Alpha, it's a broad spectrum. Some of these people are just born last year and some are 15.
Yeah. And also we have research that we've done that shows that how important it is and how valuable it can be to attract those fans into sport earlier on in life. We know that fans that are made by the age of 14 are more passionate, they're more likely to share their fandom with other people, and they're also more valuable when they get to later in life. So it's an investment in fandom now that pays off years down the line, really.
Nice. Okay, great. Look, I think we should move ourselves off the podcast table and have a look around, right? So one thing we often say about future fans and how we break down this young audience, if you follow me over to this little area where we've got a teddy bear and all sorts, we say like there's a massive difference in a 14-year-old and a 4-year-old, right? These aren't the same people, and therefore the ways of getting them interested in sport and watching content and all those good things that we want are very different depending on which end of the scale you're on, right? Joe.
Yeah, I think the way that we always talk about this, right, is our sort of made by 14 research. We talk about that as a 14-year age gap, where I think in this age bracket, it's probably more fragmented than any other bracket that we might talk about. The difference between a 4-year-old and the types of entertainment and content that they consume versus a 14-year-old is massive in a way that's completely different to if you said 24 and 34.
Yeah.
Ben's done a really good job here of illustrating that with a bunch of Roblox models.
I just went on the slide and I died. But still, yeah, it's interesting to kind of think about these different stages, isn't it? So starting out with like parents, everything, right? Toys, all that world when you're very young, and then your world opening up more the older you get, and there's a backpack there, right? I had a backpack like that. I have one on today. Starting to explore the world and just open up, go to the park, make friends, all those things. And then with friends, the shift from like the parents being the thing that brings you everything you know to actually I want to like what my friends like, right? Which is why I've got Spider-Man in there.
Yeah.
That kind of, you start to, I just seen you die on the slide.
Yeah.
You start to become more aware of brands and developing your own kind of fandoms for these things. And then the older we get, the more, well, you know, it starts quite young now, the more this kind of digital world comes in more and more as well. So gaming, hence us being here, YouTube being a massive platform to go and watch content, and not maybe we think of it because we're old. Well, I'm oldish. I think of YouTube as quite like a mobile thing, but actually now, you know, kids watching YouTube on TV as the main kind of streaming platform, and then eventually adopting social platforms and joining in on TikTok and that kind of thing. So that kind of illustrates the journey from where you start and how different you are at the two ends of this spectrum.
There's a few things on here that I think like actually illustrates the difference between and why actually Gen Alpha is so important and different to previous generations getting into sport and actually getting into media and entertainment and everything there. So we've got Netflix, YouTube, gaming, TikTok, and a mobile phone. I think like a really big and important thing about Gen Alpha is just the sheer volume of stuff that they have competing for their interests. So again, when we're talking about how we became fans, probably in an era where there were only a handful of channels for me to choose from, and every Sunday there might have been a rugby match on or something like that. Whereas now we're up against 50 million YouTube channels competing for attention, countless TikTokers, social media influencers who are trying to compete for that attention as well.
Yeah, that's what we hear, right, as well, is Gen Alpha expects like content everywhere they are. And like they're so served, I guess, because they've grown up in an era with social being a thing always, and, you know, the content that they want on their feed coming and coming. So you kind of have, if you want to cut through that, you probably have to be reaching them where they are. And where they are is lots and lots of different places, right?
It's also like massively personalized for them to the point where in a couple of weeks we can build a stadium with loads of things in Roblox that has all the things that we want to talk about as well. People create algorithms, news feeds that tailor specifically to their interests. So it's about meeting the fans there and talking to them in a way that works for them.
Yeah, the one other thing I'd add there too is like, you know, when we talk about the differences within Gen Alpha, I think there's a really interesting kind of component to it, which is goes back to personalization, right? The older you get, the more you want to have your own identity. And when you think about YouTube, it's really where do I consume, where do I watch, where do I learn? And that piques your curiosity. And then when you're in a world like Roblox, where suddenly customization and becoming your own avatar and choosing your clothes and your style, like that brings it all to life. So that's why I think those two platforms specifically, like they complement each other so well.
Yeah.
Because kids are going onto YouTube to watch and learn, especially at a younger age, right?
Yeah,
Their parents are sitting down with them and just kind of exposing them to kids' content, or whether it's just, you know, they're watching something like Thomas the Train or something like that, that just, you know, all little kids seem to be obsessed with trains. And then how does that actually spawn some curiosity where kids say, okay, now that I can have some ownership over things, I want to weave that into my own identity.
Yeah, definitely. And like, look, that brings us on nicely to Roblox, right? You mentioned personalization and kind of wanting to show your fandom and express it, and like this being a perfect platform for that. If you come to this obstacle course, so some people might not know what Roblox is, right? So I feel like we should probably explain what we're doing here. So I think there's a misconception that Roblox is a game. Probably lots of people have kids and see their kids are playing on Roblox and they think, it's just a game. But it's a huge world of games, right? A social space. There's 85 million daily users, something like that. And it's growing and growing and growing all the time. What you do in that space is kind of up to you, creating whatever kind of worlds you like. And as you can see here, like one of the ways it started out was an obstacle course. Or one of the most common games is an obstacle course or an obby, if you're in the know, which I am slightly. So that's what we're doing here, just to get up to the roof. But you can see immediately, like, the scope for building completely custom worlds with anything you'd like to do is massive. I'm already at the top, and I feel like you two are...
I've taken my time here. I think the piece of background I'd give Laura is that about a couple of weeks ago, we asked Ben to create a podcast studio in Roblox. And in classic Ben Banwood fashion, he's taken that to a whole new world and created literally a Roblox experience for us as Two Circles within it. And part of that is this obstacle course that I'll admit this isn't my first time in this world and I have struggled to get there in the past. But as well, there's just so much stuff that you can do and the opportunities are endless, really. I mean, in the time that you guys were chatting, I was throwing a basketball around and I've fallen into a pit of lava and broken into a million pieces. Successfully climbed to the top there, and you can just see all the stuff that we have and all the things that we've created there. I've actually just fallen off, so I'm going to take the little shortcut, walk my way back and take a little...
Come meet me on the roof. Yeah. I made 2 valiant attempts. I got decently far and then fell into the pit of lava.
It's a good
use that handy portal that you designed, Ben, to get me to the top. So appreciate that.
Thanks for the credit. I also got to give Gabe a shout out here, one of our studio team, for just learning this space and playing around. But I think what it shows is, like we've been saying, the possibilities are huge. And you can see behind me here, right, we've put in a little ticket stand and a shop. With a nice shopkeeper there, basically to illustrate that there are some people that are using this space really well and some brands that are looking to reach the enormous number of users here in interesting ways. I think there's an opportunity for sport definitely to embrace these two things, right? So virtual attendance, to me, the idea of maybe watching sport in something like Roblox is quite unusual. But I think if you're 14 and you've grown up playing on this platform your whole life, you were at school during the pandemic and probably had to socialize virtually with people online in a space like Roblox, then the idea of going to virtual events isn't so alien. Mm-hmm. And we've seen concerts with big attendance in Roblox kind of taking the live experience but adding an extra level of stuff to do and social gaming alongside it. And that feels like a huge opportunity for sport. There's people who have dabbled, but really interesting, I think.
Yeah. Virtual attendance is something that I think 15 years ago people would have been, that it would have almost been like an insult to sport, like you have to attend in person. The stuff you've seen, I think it's in Los Angeles, right? That bar that takes you basically into a Premier League stadium.
Yeah, the
while you sit there. Things like that, I think, and you're right, COVID and the pandemic have completely changed perceptions of what virtual attendance looks like. I don't think I've ever seen sport activate live as use their rights live in Roblox to date, but I think it's almost certainly around the corner. The size of Gen Alpha, 2 billion people potentially, and we know how big some Premier League football stadiums are. There's an immediate imbalance there. Going to be difficult to people scattered all over the world to get them to go and attend live sport. The reality is that a lot of people can't, and if this can create an experience that's similar to that, maybe not similar from the fact that you're there in person, but the way that you can socialize and you can talk to people, it's around the corner, I think, for sports.
Yeah, there has been some like ever so slight examples. I think there was some ice hockey that was almost live and you could kind of run onto the field, right? And you can experience the view from any angle there, which is another interesting part. There's been some football highlights where people have, I think FIFA did some goals were scored in a World Cup and then they were translated into Roblox form, and then you could watch that goal from any angle or maybe even pause it and take over and shoot. Like, I don't know whether that's a gimmick, something that this audience actually wants, but there's huge opportunity there to think about doing the experience differently, right?
I think that's a big point, and you said it before, which is like sports properties have to go and meet these folks where they are. And when you think about a young fan, like somebody who's like 6, 7 years old, they're still wrapping their head around the world, let alone your sport. And so the inroad to them may not be actually watching a live game or even like watching a highlight. It might actually be something that is much more crafted towards them.
Absolutely.
And then as they grow, the highlights and the live experience becomes much more attractive and lots more approachable because they've already had some familiarity through the activation that you might have done that's more kind of at their level within what their world currently is at an age of 6 or 7. So
yeah, definitely. And like there are sports trying, right? There's 500 hours, was it? What? Let me have a look for my stats. Yeah, 500 million hours spent in sports experiences, right? So in Roblox. So there's definitely sport trying there. But what we were saying, the important thing about that is those aren't all owned by the brands, right? This platform, anyone can make a game, as you can see here. Like I have made this experience, right, with the team. So there are people who are fans of things and they clearly want to be able to play those things because they are making games and they are popping up. So absolutely that kind of different way into sport exists here.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways where sports have tried to enter Roblox, right? And one of them being that sort of partnership or taking over of a space that's super popular among fans. I think like one thing that we always talk about is that Roblox, by virtue, you can fly, right? So you'd be silly creating a game that mimicked sport as it is, or creating an experience that mimics sport exactly as it is. The potential to do just crazy stuff that, you know, is impossible in real life is there, and that's probably the first thing that people need to think about when they build worlds in Roblox and when they create experiences in Roblox, is just making sure that they are using the platform for what it's good at, which is just full-on imagination, things floating in the sky, all of that sort of stuff. The other thing we should probably talk about is virtual items.
Yeah.
I know you've got some pretty staggering stats there.
Yeah, definitely. Like we talked about the importance of personalization, right? And there are some stats that the generation using Roblox, like their virtual appearance matters as much to them, if not more, than their real life appearance, I guess is the word. And they changing outfits all the time and kind of self-expression through this platform. So like I have a Reading kit on here, right? Because I almost have, I've essentially gone for a real life outfit there. Like I literally have that hat and that shirt. But it's wild, like the amount of stuff you could do and the different ways you can self-express through your avatar. Also, brilliant, you can see my backpack here is the Australian Open koala backpack, right?
Of course.
I won that playing a obstacle course. One, it makes it sound like it was hard. I think it was quite a simple obstacle course.
I'm impressed.
Thanks. I think it was quite a simple obstacle course that basically gifted you that as a result. And that means that now, in theory, users are wearing that item across multiple games and kind of brand exposure across loads of games is happening because of that clever giveaway. So that is definitely a way that lots of sports are looking at activating, and you can, you know, Man United launched a kit on there, Ajax have done their kits in Roblox. So yeah, again, huge potential for kind of people doing the brand ambassador work for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and at the moment people are doing that without the rights holders being involved, right? I'm wearing a 2024 Sheffield United third kit that I don't think was made by Sheffield United in game.
Yeah.
But at the moment, that's happening. There are some numbers that we have. I think it's something like more items sold, more money made by the sale of digital items in Roblox than some fashion brands.
Yeah.
Luxury
1.8 billion avatar clothes sold in 2023. So like,
And
insane numbers.
You couple that with the stat that younger fans spend on average like $1.88 for every dollar spent by an older generation sports fan, and like that just shows you the kind of revenue potential here to smartly kind of build out a future fan strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
The way that future fans will spend their money is actually something that the industry needs to think quite carefully about as well. It's all about sort of microtransactions, smaller things like this online. I think all of those sorts of things adding up and kind of figuring out that value that way is really important as well.
Mm-hmm. And look, if you come, there's a portal down so you don't have to take the obby through this red doorway. There's brands away from sport that are doing interesting things in this space and, you know, reaching this audience really well. Joe's trying to ride the bike.
Yes, it's really hard.
So, for example, movies, right? There's been worlds made about specifically as movies have been released, and they've done interesting things where they've integrated ticket sales. So you could be directed from Roblox off platform and actually buy cinema tickets directly from a world where you're playing the film, essentially, which I think is, again, interesting to consider for sport. There's been Starbucks did something where you could get points in game and actually cash them in for coffee, I think, in certain stores around the world. So the opportunity to link up these parts in interesting ways is huge. We've also, there's a giant Homer Simpson over here. I feel like we should probably talk about why there's a giant Homer Simpson over here. So
let me drive over there in my little hamburger cart.
Yeah, everything I believe is drivable, and there's also a little hidden spring behind here that we can play with, and it helps you fly, I want to say. Let me see. Yeah, there you go. Look at that. You can see the whole world from up here. It's amazing. Why is there a Homer Simpson there? This is another thing away from the Roblox world that something that Ben and I have been talking about a lot recently is the thing that links all of these different properties you'll see in here is that in the last 12 months, all of these guys have been part of a live sports broadcast, and it's the sort of thing you may have missed because you're thinking, I don't remember Homer Simpson playing in the Super Bowl. But what we're seeing is a really interesting trend of rights holders partnering with existing kids' IP to create a alternate live experience. It's been enabled by a bit of work with the IP to see the value of doing so, and then also an explosion of like really, really cool tech that I imagine Ben and his team will know more about than I do. But last year on Nickelodeon, I think SpongeBob performed the halftime show at the Super Bowl.
It's the thrill of one more kill, the last one to fall.
There was a Monday night NFL football game where you were creating live AR experiences where the characters from Toy Story were part of the action. I think it was around Christmas time, the NFL did similar with The Simpsons.
The ball's all the way out at the 40-yard line, so Bart will throw. It's Lisa, puts her foot in the ground, leaves her dad in the dust, and says, if anyone needs me, I'll be in the end zone.
Yeah, and NBA have done a Disney thing with kind of Mickey Mouse, and it's called Dunk the Halls, right? Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck scoring baskets.
And there's been similar stuff done by the NHL as well, and there's just lots of rights holders, particularly in America, really noticing this trend and figuring out that one of the really good ways to get in here is to use IP that kids already know and love.
Yeah, exactly. It's tying those two things together, right? Utilizing one to boost the other.
And the broadcasters using multiple rights that they own to say, how can we actually weave these two together? And I think that's a really cool educational part of what I think the NFL has done extremely well is actually like if you watch those alt casts at first glance as an adult and as maybe myself, a fan who already kind of grew up watching NFL, I wouldn't say that I need a ton of education, and yet watching that was like pure fun because I saw how cool it was to explain things like rules and penalties and flags on plays to say actually like they're explaining it in a way for kids that is actually also appealing to adults. And so you don't have the adults kind of scoffing at it going, I don't want to watch this.
Yeah.
If their kids want to watch it, they sit down and they enjoy it as well.
Well, yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
I imagine you were about to say exactly what I'm going to say, but that co-watching is just massive amongst this generation. And like a lot of people you talk to with kids will probably say that they like Bluey as much as their kids do, right? Like, and that's not by mistake. They've been designed that way so that families can sit down and enjoy an experience with their kids.
Yeah, and for parents to be able to pass on, it's the same way we were saying about I support Reading because my family do and they took me. If that's not an option, then are there these other places that you can pass on something you love to your children as well? Right. And interestingly, that kind of works the other way too, right? Like what you were saying about Bluey. If there are sports out there that maybe adopt Roblox really early, someone gets into that, absolutely loves whatever random sport it is, they will be pestering their parents to take them to that, help me play that, and then that fandom can transition up the way as well as down the way, right? It's not always passing on to kids, it's kids passing up to their parents as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But the important thing we say about all of this, right, all this Roblox, altcasts, using YouTube, whatever it is that you're doing, it's having life beyond like the one-off things, right? So that's where over here in the basketball zone, Joe, I feel like you scored earlier and now that basketball is blocking the hoop.
Yeah.
But transitioning from I've watched SpongeBob do the Super Bowl to I now want to watch more NFL content for the rest of the year and I want to start playing American football, that's the really important part to get right? It's not just doing a one-off thing for the sake of it. It's providing that continued content and opportunity.
Yeah, I think moments like these, the sort of altcast stuff and the way that sports properties have brought other IP in, that's the sort of firework thing that sparks interest, like you were talking about at the top. The challenge for everyone is how you convert that into essentially action, like going to watch sport, playing sport, buying items in real life, or buying items on digitally as well. So the challenge there is creating strong narrative and strong connection with those brands outside of a 2-hour broadcast that is really fun to watch, and creating storylines that live beyond it, because I think, as Ben mentioned as well, this is an audience that isn't really willing to wait 2 weeks until the next game, 4 days between football matches. No, they just crave content and they need things straight away. So creating things for shoulder content for those fans to engage with, wider narratives to be a part of, is all really important about building out that offer.
And on that, can I ask you both a question, which is, have you either worked with or just kind of seen examples where a sports property has really kind of smartly pulled together all of these different initiatives that they have to reach younger fans and thought holistically about that? Because to your point, Joe, if you have one team creating a Roblox experience and another team creating a real life youth football experience in a bunch of different cities, if those two teams are never talking to each other, then it's kind of fragmented. So I'm curious if you've seen that done well anywhere, or if you just feel like it's still a kind of a common struggle is to kind of actually formulate a broader, more kind of holistic strategy.
Yeah, I think that is a really important point and quite central to a lot of strategic thought that we do when it comes to future fans, is creating an actual pathway where the different things within it, whether they be content or digital experiences or merchandise or even the live event of going, where those things all talk to each other and there's a nice seamless pathway between each of them. To be honest, in sport, this whole thing is still quite new, right? But I think, as Ben and I always say, we'll ring the Lego bell here and say that they are the absolute A star of a brand that does this really well and effectively and has things that speak to different people in different age brackets and seamlessly moves them across that pathway as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the important thing, is there are sports dabbling in various little bits, and I think America seems to be ahead of the game in some respects and finding these opportunities, but not, to my knowledge, is anyone really piecing those things together as well as they could. I think it's important just to mention as well, before we finish up, that we talked about the power of the IP, right? And partnering with Toy Story and capitalizing on Toy Story's audience. Everyone already knows and loves it. You can bring in a lot of people. There is an argument that if the sports brands themselves own that IP, the power is even bigger, right? We've talked about this, Joe, mascot power and kind of having your own ambassadors and characters that speak to children and become loved and can drive that fandom, but can also appear in all these other parts, like you were just saying.
Bluey's the great example, right? Bluey is the kids product of the moment, and it isn't just a content thing. It's not just a episodic series. It's live shows, it's web experiences. I'm sure it shows up in Roblox in some way, shape or form. It's merchandise, it's loads of other things. And essentially the power of a sports property creating their version of Bluey, the opportunities are pretty massive there.
Yeah, cool. That feels like a great place to end, to be honest, Joe. What a line.
So yeah, just reconvening, because that was an awesome chat and just had a lot of fun. I guess, where does this leave us, you guys? We have talked about a lot, but what's the thing that we want people to take away as they think about future fans?
One of the things we hear from almost universally from every single one of our clients is that talking to this audience is really, really important. Different sports are going to have different things that work for them and different ways they're going to go about it. Some will immediately have advantages because of where they are culturally, and others will have to think more creatively and strategically about how they engage this audience. But essentially, it's just the opportunity, right? We're talking about an audience that is 2 billion-ish in the next couple of years, makes up about 1 in 4 people, they're scattered all across the world. They've got phones, they've got gaming tablets, they've got computers, they're fully digital. They're really, really influential and important. And all of that is probably quite daunting and it's quite challenging, but the way that we like to think about it is that it's also a massive opportunity. And that's where Ben and his brain comes into it, really.
Yeah, thanks. I joke that I still probably have the brain of a 12-year-old. So that comes in handy here. I think the one thing I would say is we've shown a lot here in a short space of time, right? We've pointed out that there's many different ways that you can potentially reach this audience. I think the default, and part of the reason that we say future fans instead of necessarily kids, is people hear kids and it's maybe dismissed, or they think we'll just make a cartoon and that will suffice. I think the important thing here is to understand this is a big audience. There's lots of differences. There's lots of places to reach them. And it's not just a simple case of, hey, let's make a cartoon that's exactly our sport. It's how do we do our sport in a different way? How do we take the things that kids will love from it and serve them those things in interesting and engaging ways, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully, that's where my brain comes in.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of these brains come in. I feel like we've had so many chats at Two Circles about how we do this on behalf of, the folks that we work with. It's a really common topic. And so plenty more to talk about. I'm going to go try to get on the bike because that's the one thing that has eluded me this entire time. But otherwise, thank you guys. This was so much fun.
Sweet.
Thanks.
Let's go play.